Hi guys, welcome. Today we're gonna do a painting tutorial. People have been requesting this for about 2 months, and I am a painter through and through. I am a painter, but it is a subject that is massive and hard to figure out how to share on video for a lot of different reasons, but I'm just gonna give it a try. Now, I started with the headlamp because this is one of my janky little tricks when you have crappy lighting and you have only one room that you're living and eating and painting in. In Oakland, I found this trick because I bought it for my first camping trip, and it's awesome because it actually really helps you be able to see your paints, and you can set the mood. So headlamps are a great option if you have one laying around. Number 2, music. Music is so important. I can't even think about, I think that's half the reason I've struggled to make a painting video, is because music and painting are so interlaced for me. Number 3, tape. So painter's tape, and you do not want to cheap out on your tape. You want to get really good painter's tape. The 3M is great, reliable, but cheaper brands that are like slightly darker blue than this, not good. And it comes in lots of different widths. I happen to just prefer this one, which I believe is 1 inch. I also have a 1/4 inch, just to show you the difference. So skinny, but I really like this one. And the reason you want painter's tape is to create a really nice frame around your work. So I'll just show you. Actually, you can kind of see back there on that canvas the way that I have it taped off, which I'll show you in just a second when we start. And we'll just do like a little teeny piece of paper today. And the paints that I'm gonna use today are gonna be watercolors, but I would like to, okay, let's start again. What is painting? Painting is the study of light. It's all about light. So today when I'm showing you painting, like beginner tutorial, who knows what I'm gonna say, I just know for a fact that I'm gonna use a glass bottle because with a light on it, it will reflect enough light for you to understand how to get started. So I had a teacher once, one of my teachers started us, you know, using glass and reflective objects, so I just thought it would be a good way to start here also. I feel like I'm already all over the place, but you know, that's sort of my MO, my specialty, a rambling channel. So no, but look, I actually have a plan. Just a little teeny plan that I wrote on another plan and then I cut it out. Okay, so when I was in high school, I painted with all sorts of paints. I don't even know. And before that I painted, you know, and I just painted and I thought paint was paint. Now, when I got to college, I was studying art education, so I had to take all of these foundations of art classes, and I ended up in a painting class. And I was introduced to oil paint, which changed my life. Now, the thing about oil paint is that it's very slow, so it's very forgiving. You could come back the next day and your paint won't be dry, and you can still nudge it if you see your proportions are out of whack or whatever, because when you start painting, what you'll realize is that you get so locked into it that you have to step away and you have to take time in between painting sessions to be able to get perspective. One of the tricks I like to do sometimes is to take a picture with my phone, particularly because I'm usually doing people portraits, and it's really easy to see when your proportions are off if you just trick your eye by using another lens to look at it. So oil is very slow. It's very good for beginning. It's also an expensive investment at first. There are lots of different types of brushes. I will not go into all of them now, but you will see some of them are flat, some of them are round. There are lots of different sizes, but there's really only like 4 shapes And then it just comes down to your brush size. So just to give you an idea. Now, while I'm at it in this bucket, it's also nice to have a big brush like this because you want to prime your canvas, or you can be lazy like me and buy a pre-primed canvas. Up to you. In painting class, had to learn how to build my own canvases, and through that process I learned that I'm a girl who likes to buy a canvas. Although I appreciate the quality of a good stretched canvas too, and you know, the love of my life might make me canvases, who knows, we'll see. A few good tools to have. This one, this is kind of like a good paint opener that you can pop the top off of cans if you're working with gesso. I've got lots of shapes and sizes of palette knives. These are metal with a wooden handle. I got everything I had to start with off of Utrecht, and I'm going to try to include down below the starter kit that my first oil painting teacher gave me, because I thought that that would be a helpful thing to pass on. Now, while we're on the subject of oil paint, these metal palette knives are great. You need something to mix your paint on, okay? So one of the favorite surfaces that I ever found to mix paint on is actually the inside of a microwave, that glass plate that rotates around with your food on it. Those, if you can find one of those at a thrift store, they are amazing. I know we're in pandemic, so you're probably not thrifting. But another idea is things like this, an acetate sort of flexible mold that you can stick on top of. Usually a light colored surface is best, so you can see the actual color of your paint and how it'll show up on the canvas. But if you wanted to, if you didn't have palette paper, which is one more option that I'll show you, this is palette paper. They also have boxes, like if you were oil painting and you had paint on this, you could put it inside of even like a, I want to say Ziploc. Maybe it is made by a Ziploc, but those Tupperware containers with the plastic lid, because the oil paint won't evaporate and dry. So if you keep it in an airtight space, you can come back to the same paint palette the next day, which is really nice. I have been painting more in acrylics, which I'll get into in a second, but with the acrylics, I like this stuff because you can kind of just rip it off. I probably have, you can see. I'm so cheap that I don't throw the papers away as if I'm ever gonna go back to them, but I'm not. So this is probably from the starting of a painting because I usually work with one color. And this is more towards the end of a painting when I'm doing details. Anyway, palette. Now, this is what I'm gonna link below. And I have had this little board since college, and it's kind of disgusting. And my signature from every painting I have done is that my hair is painted into it because it's always shedding. But this is how to set up a palette. Okay, so you have your really vibrant colors. You start with your white here, you have your really vibrant colors. You go into your browns and blacks here, and then you go into your more opaque blues, and then browns and yellows down here. So dark, light, just more opaque and more transparent paints up top. Now with, this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 17. Okay, so I have like 27 or 30 paints on here. Some of those are ones that I have purchased since that class. So I'm gonna try to trim this down to actually just the basics that I very first started with, because you learn so much about color when you're mixing paint. That's a huge, mixing paint alone, just trying to swatch colors, trying to match colors is a lesson in itself. So if you want somewhere to start, I would start with getting a few primary colors and then getting a white and getting a black, but really set those aside until you know what you're doing with mixing colors, because adding white and black is just gonna muddy up your palette if you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, primary colors and mixing colors is a great place to start, in addition to testing out painting glass. So this is the palette. I will link it below. And if you are going to set up your paints, that's how I would set them up, right on here. Okay, it just keeps everything clean. So that's palettes. Now the other thing that's really important is taking care of your brushes, which I really try to do, but I can't say that I'm the best, but I do try. So two things: you want to take care of your brushes, but you also want to take care of your hands, because a lot of oil paints actually are toxic. So I don't know, we all take certain risks, and I've dabbled in a lot of oil paint in my life. This is a pretty common brush cleaner and conditioner. So when you open it up, there's just it's like a little bar of soap almost. And what you do is you get a little bit of water on there, you swirl your brush around, swirl it around, run it through the water, make sure it moves freely like this. Oh, you can see all the paint coming out. And then you soap it up, you try to get all the paint out, and then you go back in, coat it, and you coat your brush, and you make sure that you smooth all your bristles out just like they would if they were a perfect brand new brush. And then you want to lay them flat to dry. Now I like to lay my brushes, if this was a counter, I would lay it like this over the counter just so that it dries, and every couple of hours just give it a little turn so that it dries evenly. Brushes, okay, cleaning. The other common one, this pink soap, is what I like to use on my hands after I paint to make sure that I'm getting all of the chemicals off my skin the best I can. Because also with oil paint, since it doesn't dry, if you have it on your skin and you, I don't know, sit on your couch, you're gonna have paint there for the rest of your life. So you wanna be careful because it can get everywhere. Apron. That's also why I wear an apron. One of the things when you're working with different mediums, so what you do is you mix these paints, you get your color, but you don't just mix the paints together and put it on the board when you're working with oil. What you wanna do is thin out that paint a little bit. You can also use thickeners to make it more opaque. There's all sorts of mediums that you can mix in. I have a little prescription for one that I will also link below underneath the palette colors that you can make with linseed oil and Dharma varnish. And it just thins out the paint a little bit, because especially when you're working in oil, your goal is not to quickly cover the whole canvas necessarily. It's to build layers of paint working with light. So what I'm going to show you today is watercolor, and that'll show you what I'm talking about when I say you're painting the light. Okay, so that is my quick demo on oil. Moving on, acrylic. Acrylic is what I have been using most in the last 2 or 3 years. For some reason, maybe 4, but for some reason, I guess I started painting in oil in 2004, I think. So yeah, so I probably painted in 100% oil for 10 years. And then when I was living in Oakland, I think I just fell into, there were some great little thrift stores for artists, and I used to just buy random supplies I could find. And especially if I knew something was high quality and cheap, I would definitely just buy it. So I started just playing around with acrylic, and I really liked it because I could work faster. Now, I don't know if I would have felt that way if I hadn't spent 10 years learning how to really look at something and really paint it using the oil, which is slower and more forgiving, but the acrylic just let me work really fast, and you can kind of get layers on there in a much more rapid pace because things dry quickly. So you can use a lot of the same brushes for acrylic. You just really want to be careful when you're washing. You just really want to take good care of your brushes, is the bottom line. So yeah, that being said, oil, slow and forgiving. Acrylic, fast. Watercolor, what do I want to say about it? Whimsical. I don't even know why I'm doing this in watercolor because it's not my specialty, but I have a special love for it, and I just got a new palette and I want to try it out. When I started working with watercolors, I did watercolor pencils, which I can show you because I've got a book here. I can show you some recent ones. Okay, so this is watercolor pencil. And basically you just take the pencil and you draw on the paper, and then you take a brush with water and you go in, and you want to have a paper towel. Paper towel is your best friend with watercolors, because if it starts to bleed or anything like that, you just sop it right up. If it's too intense, you just sop it right up. Now, the paper you use makes a big difference. So I'll show you something that I hate. This paper was terrible. You can see it, I mean, it looks like colored pencil, like the water wouldn't even adhere. And I think it was because the paper was older, but it could also be that I was on the wrong side of it. It's hard to say. Anyway, so one thing I've found though, this book that I'm showing you this out of is great. I think it's gonna be 11 by 14. Maybe it's 9 by 12. No, 9 by 12. And it's on Amazon, and I can also link that below, because this is particularly for watercolors, and it's just a really nice paper set, and I just like the way it all stays. And sort of, I don't know what it is with watercolors, but like I haven't really hung them up. I have 2 of these books. Yeah, and they're just kind of like little diaries or something. But what I ordered with my new palette are some little cards like this. And I believe these are a cold press paper. Honestly, in the research, I've heard people say that they don't really have a preference either way. I don't know much about watercolor paper, and honestly, I don't care as long as the paint works on it. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I'm very into like thrifting, so a lot of things I'll find at thrift stores and just try it out. It's super cheap, and I don't know, there's something about that adds to the creativity. So watercolor, my brush palette is definitely different. So you can see these are what I use for watercolor. Okay, they're much smaller, you'll notice. Okay, they're much smaller, much more delicate. People talk about these all the time. I still haven't really learned how to use this brush. I only know that it could be used for your what's that thing called? Highlighter. This is one of my favorites, just for covering big areas or doing skies and things like that. And then what I've found is that it's really nice to have some brushes like these with super flat, harsh angles. Okay, see that? Because when you're working on the outline of something and you want to have a straight line, it's super helpful. Like with a rounded brush, you'll never get a flat line, so you really need a straight brush for that. Now with these, I mean, half of my brushes are like literally old Crayola. Now I don't recommend them, but who cares? Like, use what you have to start with. Yeah, this is one of my favorites, and this is Crayola, so props to Crayola. But if you're looking to invest, I do think getting brushes, I personally like the feel of a wood handle, but you gotta be careful and you want quality. Like you can see on this one, I don't know if it's gonna show you, you see all those little hairs splintering out? See, with watercolor, I don't use this. Maybe I should, I've just never tried. So the brushes tend to get damaged, but I also think it's because honestly they're super cheap brushes, so whatever. I like to use empty jars to store my brushes. You can use whatever you have, do you. Okay, so let me clear some stuff out of the way. Actually, no, I'm just gonna show you really quick. This is the palette that I just bought. And and I got it on Amazon. And one of the things that was my favorite thing about watercolor with the pencils is that I would throw it all in a little pouch, put it in my backpack, and I used to go up, this sounds a little morbid, but I used to go up to this cemetery in Oakland by myself after work, and I would spread out a blanket and I would paint, because I could just throw that notebook and the paints right into my backpack, and I found it to be a really transportable medium. So I took watercolors with me to Germany. I took watercolors with me when I go to the beach. So I like that they're transportable. So one of the things that I really liked about this particular little paint tin is that it has a little finger holder, which you might be familiar with your phone if you have a pop socket or a whatchamacallit like I do. So the nice thing about this set is that up here it comes with a place to mix your paints, which is really cool. And then these are the paints, okay? So it also came with one brush, which this is the type of brush in which you can put water, which I just can't see how that's gonna work out, because I feel like it's just gonna be a muddy mess. I don't see how you wash it out, but I'll learn that. I'll try it out. But if not, I'm pretty sure that I'm just gonna plop my favorite brushes right into that little case. But other than that, this was, I think, 26 bucks. So to me, I mean, honestly, I'm pretty cheap, so that feels a little expensive, but I love the container and I love the transportability. And it came with this little card, so you can see I did a little swatch test of all the different paints and all the different colors, which I thought was really cool because it reminded me of this. Because no matter what, when I'm painting, particularly in oils, I always pull this out to set up my palette, because I could do it by my brain, but it's so much easier for me just to pull out the paint tube and visually look at where it needs to go on my palette. And this is sort of like that, and it's transportable and it fits right in the little case, so you always have a reference, because with watercolor, it's not as forgiving as oils. So once you put it down, it's down. So it's kind of nice to have a reference for what your color is really gonna look like. So that's the palette. Now, I want to show you how I can figure out how to do an angle of this. Also, for watercolor, you need water. So this is just an old jar of peanut butter. It's a glass jar. But what you can see on here is this is all taped up, right? So, and you'll see that this is the edge of the paper, and the paint, the tape, I basically line up right with the edge. So you just rip off a piece and show you. So let's say we're gonna paint here. I just try to line it up with that edge as best I can. And it's not always perfect, and nobody's gonna notice. Once they see that you made a painting, they're not like, well, let me see those edges. Well, except sometimes. And if you look at the edges of my painting, they're not good, because when you're working on canvas with a lip on it, it really is best to paint all the way to the sides of the painting. Look, watch, I'll show you. It's like looking in somebody's underwear drawer. See, you kind of want to paint all the way down here, so that it doesn't, you can see, it just looks messy. But anyway, I just don't do that, so. All right, so one. Now, I like to do the top and then the bottom, and then go in for the sides, just because I find that it is better to get it flat first. And then I kind of eyeball it. Don't be cheap with your paint, with your tape. Be liberal, because you want it to stay on there. My friend Catherine once messaged me. I had posted like a work in progress on Instagram, and she was like, she's an art teacher, and she was like, what, are you broke? Put some paint on that canvas. And I was like, oh my god, I am feeling really broke and I am almost out of paint. But leave it to the art teacher to tell you what you need to hear, and it is important to cover your services. So now you can see this teeny little postcard. I got these because they're postcard size, so technically I could pop a stamp on it and throw it in the mail. Now, okay, I'm gonna pause this while I figure out how to show you the light and the bottle thing. One moment.